Hey everyone, welcome to Book of Katherine and Happy New Year. Happy 2019. If you have been following me on Twitter, then you know that it has been one heck of a wild ride in 2018. And I have no idea how to summarize that year. But what I can say, and I tried my best on Twitter over the last 5 days, but what I can say is that based on last year, we can have one heck. I know 2019 is going to be an incredible year. As I said at the end of it, I was like, if I can walk, then you can run. Basically, if I can walk again, then you can run for office after that year. Because I walked through everything that it took to get me to walk again. And I mean, it's still like just to get me upright again and walking at times. And I have to rehab my whole body. So there are still times. It was so funny because I was like, oh, getting myself, and I was moving stuff on the couch, and I was like, right, like I had to still bathe myself with these today. But I am starting to shower again. Like that is a huge step. It's actually becoming a part of my life. So it just can't become a part of my life consistently. Like movement is slowly making its way back into my life again. And if that can happen to me, and where I was at, a life of pretty much being paralyzed in bed, not pretty much, I was just paralyzed, scrunched up in a ball and slowly unfurling with this small window of 30 minutes, of being able to shuffle, around the house, maybe, if I was lucky, and then being passed out from the pain for days. I'd pass out for 2 or 3 days from the pain. I just go into these like coma-like states from the pain. If I can come out of that into walking again and doing what I did, I filmed a video for you on Christmas Eve. I was able to go up to where I did my first test and procedure, and where I had a test to see if this procedure would work again. And that was a short test to see if it would work. And so it only lasted like a couple hours. Well, this time, there wasn't a test. The procedures had been done over a year. And I got up there and I showed you what I was able to do. And I'll link that video right here. So when I have time. So I'm working on other things, which I talk about on Twitter. So, but if I can do that, then you can run. And what we did with Clean the GOP, we're learning, was so huge. If you watch my original Clean the GOP video, I actually name the UN. I actually say that, we know a small group of people, a very small group of people, is actually running the press. The press is the mouthpiece for them. And this small group of people all have the exact same political agenda. And they run the banks, they run the media, they run, and I just listed all these things that they run. I said they're wealthy and they're this and they're that, and we know these things about them, and we know they're international. I mean, I actually said all of that, introduced and Clean the GOP. So Clean the GOP was designed to wipe out the UN's influence in the beginning, and we succeeded, and here we are in 2019, and you can feel the difference. You can feel the difference, and they're going to do everything they can. And that's my message to you for 2019. I want to share something that I did for you that inspired for me to change my life. And I traveled someplace that I never traveled before, and being raised in California, they kind of, the narrative there is very different about the rest of the states. Once I stopped leaving the cities there and started traveling out into the smaller towns, it was really a culture shock for me, learning that not every place was like California and the same culture as California. I started learning the cultures of each state. Well, one of the things I ran into was the Outer Banks, which is an amazing national monument. The Outer Banks is no different than, South Dakota and things like, and the Grand Tetons. Why don't they talk about the Grand Tetons? That's like the Swedish Alps sitting. It's just south of Yellowstone, but they talk about Mount Rushmore and they talk about Yosemite And they talk about the Appalachian Mountains, but they don't talk about the Grand Tetons, these Swedish Alps sitting in the middle of Wyoming, and they don't talk about the Outer Banks. And these are places we ran into on accident. And we ran into the Outer Banks. And you know why we went there? We were looking for Kitty Hawk. And Kitty Hawk is where we took first flight. It was Americans that took first flight. And it was through what I guess today conservatives would call capitalism. I call it individual freedom. I mean, I know Tucker Carlson said that what is America's goal? What is our goal for all these new senators and all these new freedom fighters that we have in Congress? What should be our goal? What should be our vision for all the freedom fighters across the nation? And my answer isn't families at all. A lot of us have broken families. And when the founders wrote the Constitution, they had a choice, and they were facing something very much like the UN. You have to remember that. The founders of this country were facing the British Empire. The British Empire was very similar to the UN. The sun never set on the British Empire. They reached across the entire world. The British Empire ruled the world, and they were very elite. They were exact same way, and they had slavery the same way. They had incredible money. They had incredible power. They had incredibly high taxes. You know, very, very similar, very, very similar ethics and everything like that. And felt the same way about Americans that these elite do about us. They think we're subhuman, and they think we're low class. And the way they talk, if you read the writings they wrote about us back then, it's exactly the way the elites talk about conservatives today. And when I say conservatives, I mean anyone who isn't a communist, you know? And so communism didn't exist back then, but look at the attitudes. They're exactly the same. No, I think the founders had a choice, and the founders in the Constitution did not emphasize families. They emphasized individual freedoms. And I think that's what our leaders need to focus on. The UN has systematically, even since 76, since the very first climate convention that they had, they first started way back in 76. If you look at the land settlement agreement, they actually said that it is a social injustice for anyone in the world to own private land. Well, I don't know if you know this, but people in America used to be able to own their land and do whatever the heck they wanted to do on that land. If they paid for the land was theirs. They didn't have to have a permit from a government official to have a bathroom added on, to have a handicap wing on. Like, we have to have we can't build. I need things for my handicap thing. We can't build because it has to be a certain distance from the boundary of the land. Like, the state and the government are so overreaching. They came and they've done more to our land than we have, and we're supposed to be the owners of it. You know, we're always like, oh, what's going to happen to our land next? And they called that in 1976 public good. And they've been handing down laws. We have not been private. We have not been free for a really long time. All the permits that we have to go through, that's not freedom. And when we have freedom, we're able to do things like take and invent flight. And when they talk about the immigrants, this is the backbone of the country. No, the backbone of the country is individual freedom. When man has individual freedom, they create. And when man creates, they have free markets. Men don't have free markets right now. They go, they create, they expand, and then someone sues them because they see a good money opportunity, and they take those profits for themselves because that's the way our courts are set up. Men don't have a lot of freedom today, and they need to have the ability to be free, not to, freedom from taxation, it really doesn't take that many taxes to run the state. I mean, way back in the 1900s, early 1900s, the tax rate was something like 1% or something like that, a flat tax of 1%, something crazy like that, and that ran everything. It really takes a lot less than you think to run the country, and they just say it does because there's so much corruption. You'd be shocked at how little it actually takes. And I know that because I worked for so many different government agencies, up through I didn't realize it until, I started doing politics and stuff like that. But the waste was unending, and so when men have freedom, they have the freedom to create and go. And that's what happened is immigrants came here. They didn't have a welfare system to fall back on, but they had the freedom to build their own businesses, their own restaurants, and do whatever they wanted on their land. And when they had that freedom, what happened? The Wright brothers went and they invented flight. And there was a race around the world to create flight. But here's something that most people don't know. This is what I learned, and you won't learn it on Wikipedia. They won't tell you this on Wikipedia, and this is what you need to know for 2019. I learned on Wikipedia, I learned by going to Kitty Hawk. I learned that the Wright brothers, everyone in the world was trying to be the first in flight. They really thought that they could feel that, man was going to fly. And there was competition all over the world. Like, there were men on the brink of flying. But the Wright brothers kept going to Kitty Hawk. They owned a bike shop up in Dayton, Ohio, I think it was. And they owned a bike shop up in Dayton, Ohio. And then what they do is go to Kitty Hawk down in North Carolina, out on the Outer Banks. Amazing place, that entire row of banks. You've got to go see it. Blackbeard used to have his thing there. And it's just stunning place to go visit and camp and rent a house. Just incredible beauty. Just drive anything, take it. I mean, it's insane. I can't believe no one knows about it. It's far out there on the map. You might not realize how far out it is, but if you look at that bottom ferry, it takes 2.5 hours for that bottom ferry to get over. It's insane. And what happened is that no one was taking off. It's taking years and years and years. And what the Wright brothers realized is they couldn't fly. They couldn't fly. You know what they did? They were like, we think the math books are wrong. I want you to let that sink in. They were like, we think the math books are wrong. All these tables and charts of wind and drift and lift that man has been and industry have been working on for all these years, we think they're incorrect. And they went in their bike shop and they built a wind tunnel with their wheels, and they made their own calculations, and they did new math charts on wind and lift. And the next summer, using those calculations, we, America, took flight because they didn't trust what was in the books. They trusted reality, what they saw here on the ground. This year, I encourage everyone to go to Kitty Hawk and read their story. Stand on the ground of first flight. Stand on the monument there and read their words, because they are exactly what America was built for. That is the future of America. That is the future of wealth, harmony, freedom for all. You may say that it's family, but I say families don't grow until love exists. Families grow out of love, joy, and happiness. You can't plant a seed for a family in sterile earth. Where does fertile earth come from? From excitement, freedom, joy, love, freedom to be who and what you are. And we don't have any of that right now. America's laws don't allow for it. That's what our congressmen across sea to shining sea should be focusing on, is ripping back the laws 50 years and setting us back to a 1950s America where we're free. Then families will come back because we'll have fertile land again. We'll be able to breathe. That's my wish. That's my goal for 2019. Because individual freedom is what our forefathers believed in when they wrote the Constitution facing the British hordes. Not very different from who we're facing now. And they didn't choose to focus on families. Because there weren't a lot of families back then, were there? They were torn apart. They had set out on their own to make a new start. And then families were born from there, weren't they? You know, I didn't meet my husband, now that I think about it. I didn't meet my husband until I set off on my own, until I quit my job and fought for myself. Until I did that, I didn't find out who I was. And when I found out who I was and went off on my own and bucked my family and bucked the system, my husband appeared out of nowhere. So if that isn't proof, I don't know what else to tell you, because I can tell you right now, he and I are pretty different. We stand out pretty hella different. And a lot of people want what we have. And I'm telling you, it's individual freedom. That's what does it. And that's what I wish for you in 2019. And you can learn all about it with the Wright brothers. And they did it at Kitty Hawk and in Dayton, Ohio. By not trusting the media, not trusting their books, but trusting what they saw in real life. They didn't trust the Matrix. And I can't tell you how important that will be this year in 2019. Peace out. I love you so much. Thank you for the most amazing 2018. You changed my life. Let's change it again, all of our lives, in 2019, because we're going global with freedom this year. Bye. Oh, watch these videos. And please donate down below. Thank you so much. Bye. Happy New Year.